start. We're now live on YouTube.
Must I have to start immediately, or?
Yes, Stefania, you can.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome.
Stefania, we can't hear you.
You cannot hear me?
Two.
Yes.
One, two, three.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes, Stefania, we can.
Okay, thank you. There is somebody not muted, sorry. Well, I think we can start. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are, and welcome to this inclusive, innovative dialogue towards a global partnership strategy, advancing the early childhood agenda. It's a great pleasure, really, to virtually greet some of the world's leading experts for this technical segment to advance the early childhood care and education agenda. And let me say, first of all, that what you're doing today is a bit something different from what we've been done through the recent months, in very many webinars, in very many interesting, sometimes inspiring discussions. It's a kind of new format, an innovative dialogue to define a global partnership strategy, which is definitely the only way forward in the wake of the global education disruption that continues to this day. The world's youngest children have been severely affected by this pandemic. Millions are today at risk of falling into extreme poverty. According to UNESCO monitoring, 35 million children at the pre-primary level are still affected by national school closures today. We estimate that enrollments and at this level could decline by nearly 3%, affecting 5 million children more. And this is actually an unprecedented situation. This is an emergency, as we know, requiring then new strategies to attract more sustained attention to early childhood care and education on policy agendas and to influence financing decisions on that as the most powerful investment to combat inequality and poverty early on, to give children a strong start in school and life. And this challenge precedes the crisis, but it has become even more urgent today. Our dialogue today follows a call, a very special call for action launched by Princess Laurentien. Let me really warmly thank her again for leadership and commitment and concrete action in this sector. She's with us today, and she will definitely lead the process we are running. Well, we need a clear analysis, a diagnosis of why the case of early childhood is still not translating into bolder political and financial commitments so far. Too often, ECCE is fragmented across different ministries, we know. And this is about a weak point, of course, and this is about a lack of data, which are obstacles still to unlocking progress to inform better policies. There are very step challenges in terms of access and equity, especially in the global south, especially in the sub-Saharan region. By nature, education, early childhood education and care is a multidimensional one, encompassing learning, health, sanitation, nutrition, care, and of course, social protection. We have seen the importance of these linkages, especially in this crisis. our response has to involve then stakeholders working across these sectors. It's not a silos perspective what you're doing today. Only a whole government, only an holistic approach can help us to address differently, to think differently, and let me say, to genuinely take off and take root in education systems. Equity must be our compass, calling for focus on the world's most vulnerable children, those with disabilities or developmental delays, those affected by violence, by conflicts, displacement, and poverty. And this is a bit of the global partnership strategy about to be collaborative, to support these children and spur higher investment. We propose to structure the global dialogue we are starting today around definitely 3 building blocks. First, a stronger evidence for action. Second, collaboration to foster more holistic ECCE ecosystems. Third, last but really not least, financing. To identify and unlock funding sources and target them to advance inclusion. This also ties into the review we are leading of the SDG 4 coordination mechanism to increase accountability and allocate financing where it is needed most. 10 years ago, let me conclude like this, in Moscow, UNESCO in cooperation with the Russian Federation and partner organization organized the first World Conference on ECCE, aptly entitled Building the Wealth of Nations. With 9 years from now to 2030, ECCE must be fast-tracked to build this wealth. I really look forward to taking forward this innovative and strategic approach, and it's about really giving every child a fair, caring, and healthy start in life. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefania, ADG, for these introductory remarks. It sets for us the background and I would say the scene for engaging in this technical session that we are organizing today. Let me just start by reminding colleagues that we are engaged in quite an important process that started already a few months ago when we had the webinar on the same topic, and that we organized it a few weeks ago, the inception meeting where we collected important insights, suggestions, but also we agreed on process of preparing the input for the technical session, which hopefully will prepare for the high-level session that we are planning end of January next year. Maybe just to remind also that we have agreed on preparatory work that we have been engaging in during the last few weeks. And thanks to many colleagues who engaged in this process, we have prepared the issue notes and case notes that we have shared with the different participants. Also, we have the pleasure to have Emily Vargas with us, who is chairing the drafting committee that started looking at the way we can prepare for the high-level session, with also the important support that we are having from Princess Laurentien. Stefania, you mentioned the critical role that Princess is playing, and I will come back to that later on. But just to explain that this technical meeting will be an important milestone for us to agree on the key pillars that were highlighted now, the approach that we would like to have, and the way forward. And let me say that we are not looking for a strategy that is generic, that is broad. We are looking for a strategy that is implementable, that is result-based, that is outcome-based, that will be driven by a mission approach for which obviously once we adopt the overall areas, we'll be focusing also on the modality of its implementation, the organization to achieve it, and the way we would like to monitor and evaluate the progress so that we are accountable to the international community related to the progress. Also, as Stefania mentioned, this initiative is not disconnected from the global agenda on education, the link with the SDG 4, the approach toward the global education architecture and how to blend policy with data and financing. And this is something that we will be discussing as we move forward. So maybe without delay, let me give the floor to Emilie. Good afternoon to you, Emilie, or good morning, rather. Please, you have the floor.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's a great pleasure to be with you all today at the beginning of this wonderful effort. Unfortunately, the pandemic has laid bare early childhood inequalities in countries around the world, and it has worsened them. No group has been more harmed, more profoundly than our children, and especially those who live in poverty, have developmental delays, disabilities, chronic ill health, and malnutrition. Today, UNESCO is bringing us hope during the darkest of times. I am honored to serve as the chair of the drafting group. I shall encourage broad participation from all countries, facilitate the coordination of many valuable suggestions, and help to set priorities in order to produce a high impact call for action for the global partnership strategy. To develop the call to action, we shall first establish 3 building block teams, as was mentioned, and these building block teams are for building forward better. Today, the leaders of our teams will give you a few of their initial ideas. As they speak, please begin to list topics, ideas, and suggestions that you wish to offer. Please do not worry about which building block you should select. We shall do our very best to place your ideas in the right places. After this meeting, we shall constitute the full building block teams for drafting the call to action. First, each building block team will develop an annotated outline using the following 3 main sections. Section 1, issues and challenges, and we do know what they are. Section 2, strategic priorities for change. These are less clear and must be established, at least 3 or 4, maybe 5 per building block. And then a call to action with concrete proposals and hopefully firm agreements. This 6th section of the building block will be used as a basis for subsequently formulating our action plan. Each building block team is requested to gather ideas and suggestions from all of your colleagues and other persons. Then they will meet to prepare the detailed outline and the first draft of the call to action. All building block teams and our UNESCO colleagues will review the first drafts. Then all teams will meet together to identify overlaps, gaps, and suggestions for additions and deletions. Subsequently, each team will quickly prepare a second draft and submit it for editing. Then our call to action will be presented to the high-level session that will be held on the 28th of February, 2021. After that, we shall draft our action plan using, once again, a participatory approach. Above all, we are looking for exciting new ideas that will break through the barriers and challenges we have all faced in our countries and in other countries. We greatly look forward to receiving your contributions. Thank you very much.
Merci, Emilie.
Thank you, Emilie, for that introduction, which is a very important one as it gives us an overview of the process that you have engaged in, and we're very grateful for your support. I'd like to remind colleagues that you may choose the language for your for this session by clicking on the interpretation button. You can choose whichever language you prefer. And we will exchange in French, English, and Spanish today. Therefore, feel free to choose the language you prefer. Thank you once again, Emily. Thank you.
Move to introduce Princess Laurentien. There is no way to introduce you, Princess, but I would like to recall that Princess is our challenger. She challenged us on in mid-July, but I think what we really appreciate is that Princess Laurentien didn't only challenge us, but also joined us to work and engage actively. Let me, if I can use a qualifier, is the innovative architect of the process of the strategy development, and we are also looking, of course, for really important input and push from your side, Princess Laurentien. Let me, if you don't mind, I would like to give you the floor immediately to introduce a bit the process and explain to colleagues how we are suggesting to work. Please, the floor is yours, Princess, and good afternoon to you.
Thank you so much, Laurent. I feel that we are indeed, all of us, we're on a journey, and to pick up on the words of Stefania, a journey of emergency. And I think that we all, the danger of tackling an emergency, we've all had our experiences, is that you immediately get into action and then you roll it out. And actually, the whole idea behind the dialogue methodology is to build this strategy bottom up, because all of you are co-owners of that strategy. So that requires this co-creation approach. And Emily, I think you really summed it up fantastically. And very often we develop all kinds of thinking, and then later on we think about implementation, and we're building implementation into the process right from the beginning. And therefore I really believe in the power of this process, thanks to the leadership of Stefania and Borhan and your team and Emily and all of the drafters and the leads for each of the building blocks. So I think this afternoon we should be talking and about content, but also about process and about implementation, and to make sure that this is not a paper strategy, because we don't have the luxury for that, as Emily and Stefania rightly and pointed out already. Why inclusive dialogue? All of you have different pieces of the puzzle to co-create this strategy. There's not one right. So this afternoon is not about convincing each other of your own right, but it's about pulling together all that thinking power so that later on this is a collective strategy and not from one perspective. But that requires a certain way of listening to each other, but also a discipline to say, if you speak for 2 minutes, that's it. All of you can speak for an hour and we won't have heard all of the wisdom that you have. So that is my goal, my role partly, to be the annoying timekeeper and to say, and I am not polite. I can tell you, I love you all, but I'm not polite. After 2 minutes, I will say, enough, let's move on, because there is wisdom in this entire group of 251 participants. The goal is indeed to get that those insights. And what I will do in a moment is to ask each of the building block team leaders to give a 3-minute highlights of that topic, about the main issues, the key bottlenecks, and what questions do we have for this global community attending today. So you give a context of each of the issues. And to all of you, as Emily already pointed out, I'd like to resonate that. Please listen carefully, write down for yourself some thoughts that come to mind when you really listen. So we require today as deep listening, because that way we can really make this a shared thinking process. No reactions in the chat, because that will show that you're not listening. We know that women are thought to be multitaskers, but I think evidence shows we are not. No one is a multitasker. So we listen after the three speakers have given their thoughts. I will put one question in the chat, and then you can use the chat to give all of your thoughts on the reactions. So that would be really helpful if we can take that discipline. So on that note, I would ask Joan Lombardi, lead for Building Block 1, Evidence for Action Focus on Accountability, to give your 3-minute highlights. And after that, I will start waving and say, Joan, I'm sitting next to you, and over to the next one. Really wonderful, and I have full confidence that together we can really build this together this afternoon so that we can move in January at the political level. Joan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your amazing leadership, and to UNESCO for inviting me. Given the impact of COVID on children, we have to take every opportunity to make the case for investments in early childhood. My understanding is that this session is about input and to make sure that we have the journey right. Every journey needs clarity on the destination. I'm going to assume that the goal is always equity and access for quality services. The question is, how can UNESCO help us? What can this particular effort add? There have been several efforts over the years. What's the potential added value here? Now, there's several options. We could have looked at the evidence around the importance of the workforce, or the importance of family engagement, the challenge of technology. We could take one aspect of the field, or we could take a piece of the continuum, 0 to 3, preschool, primary. So that's another option to go. In this case, I think as we start this journey, the understanding is to look at the continuum from prenatal to age 8. But there are some challenges. For example, we know that one developmental period builds on another. The education goals reinforce that with learning begins at birth. But we still have a challenge. How do we change education and other policies so they reflect the link that what happens to children under 3, under 5 impacts the primary grades and the success that a child may have in the primary grades? Secondly, we know that the domains of development are integrated. This is a basic principle of child development that's reflected in the nurturing care framework about what children need and the importance of the enabling environment that families and communities provide. Yet we still have a challenge. How do we change education and other policies so they reflect the relationship between health, nutrition, and learning, and underscore the importance of family to learning? We have to use the evidence to meet these challenges, but we have gaps, and it's not easy. For example, I'll just give you 3 quick ones. If we looked at the data and the demographics, we all use the fact that about 250 million children under 5 in low and middle income countries are at risk of not meeting their developmental potential. We know COVID is going to increase that number, but we don't have the exact number yet. We know that if we look at the continuum, we need to add the children in the early primary grades. If we looked at the science of child development, much of our science talks primarily about the first 1,000 days. We need to look at the science behind the continuum. If we looked at what works on the intervention data and literature, which has been emerging over the years, we need much more focus on data from the global south, and we need longitudinal data. So those are some of the challenges in front of us, and I'm hoping this effort can help meet them.
Fantastic, Joan. Really wonderful, succinct, challenging, and really to the point. So we'll pick up these issues later on in the working groups, obviously. Thank you so much. I would like to ask, and it's up to you how you divide how you speak and who speaks. Kristen McConnell and Divya Leta, team leaders for Building Block 2 on financing. Sorry, actually that's number 3, so financing. let's not make it too linear. So we go from 1 to 3 to 2, just to keep us on our toes.
Great, thank you so much. So yes, I'm representing the group focusing on financing, and much of what I'll speak about today comes from the 2019 UNICEF Global Report on Pre-Primary Education, which has a wonderful chapter on financing with really good data, country examples, and recommendations. So please check out that report, as it covers much more than I'm able to talk about right now. So the issue at hand, we know that domestic financing for pre-primary education is persistently low, inadequate, and inequitable. In 2017, on average, only 6% of domestic education budgets were allocated to early childhood education, and this is much worse in low-income countries, which invest less than 2% of their domestic education budgets to early childhood. So we know it's essential for governments to increase their early education budgets, but it's important to make sure that the resources allocated are used efficiently and equitably. So with such small budgets for early childhood education, governments had this monumental task of ensuring that all children receive at least 1 year of quality pre-primary education. So to do so, this may require exploring different modalities, and governments will need targeted approaches for reaching the most vulnerable children. We know that increasing financing to early childhood education relies on several interconnected enabling factors. First, that one of the factors is to have a strong subsector analysis, plan, and budget for early childhood education. So we have to know what the problems are, have good data behind it, have a smart plan on how to improve it, and have a budget to ensure that all elements of that plan are well costed and budgeted for. We also know that that plan means nothing unless there's strong political will and commitment to ECE through policy and legal frameworks. And we know that aligned and targeted investments, especially to reach the most marginalized, are important. So this will include leveraging the private sector and non-state actors. So the 3 questions I'm going to ask the group today in my subgroup will be, what do you think are the 2 biggest bottlenecks towards increasing financing for ECE at the country level? This could be financing by public, private, or international sources. Secondly, what do we know is working? What tools and support are improving enabling conditions and increasing financing of ECE? And lastly, what additional targeted global analytical work or advocacy could be helpful for increasing financing at the country level? How together can we harmonize our work on this, and what can we prioritize for collective effort? Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thanks very much again for these questions, and we'll pick that up later on. And then for building block number 2, Elizabeth and or Mercedes, Elizabeth Liu, Mercedes Mayol, the floor is yours to highlight the key issues on building block number 2, collaboration.
Thank you very much, and I'm truly honored to be speaking on behalf of the group working on collaboration together with my co-chair Mercedes, who will speak at the end to synthesize the working group's discussions. I'm speaking on behalf of the Early Childhood Development Action Network, a global network of networks, plus 4 ECD regional networks for Africa, Asia Pacific, Arab and Middle East countries, as well as Europe. As we've heard, early childhood development is where multiple sectors and multidimensional issues interplay, requiring multisectoral and multifaceted responses. Every aspect of young children's development is interrelated, interdependent, and mutually reinforcing. And yet, domestic and international investments and approaches are rarely holistic. Both vertical and horizontal coordination have been hampered by the incentive structures that limit collaboration and result in silos and competition between sectors and partners. And these siloed approaches result in inefficiencies, overlaps, and gaps that ultimately lead to less outcomes for young children and very often in missed opportunities, especially for the most vulnerable. And they also do not result in providing and offering quality early childhood services, nor the greatest return on investment, and nor are they inclusive of children, in particular those who are most vulnerable and marginalized. And I think COVID-19 has laid bare what was not working before and increased the risks and inequalities, which we must address now. So what are the main barriers to collaboration? There's a lack of consensus on priorities and interventions across different sectors. We often are divided around the age groups covered for early childhood development and learning, and on framing the narrative around ECD priorities and interventions, and this often causes confusions. We have siloed approaches to ECD around budgets and the workforce. And sometimes ministries do not view early childhood development in a holistic manner, driven by their own sectoral mandates and resulting in intersectoral rivalries and consequently interfere with collaboration and integrated services. And very seriously, the lack of inclusion and equitable access to the most vulnerable children and those living in humanitarian contexts. The poor and disabled are often left out. So what are the paradigm, two more things, limited data and the children's rights are also very important aspects we must keep into account. What are the questions that we should address? Are there new approaches to deal with the challenges inherent in large and multi-sectoral systems? How will we strengthen national capacity? How will we strengthen partnerships, networks, and coalitions to build a vibrant and dynamic collaborative global movement? And how will we build on the internationally agreed declarations and goals, including the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child? Thank you.
Thank you so much to the three of you, to Joan, Kristen, and Elizabeth, for highlighting this. And I'm sure that all of you sitting wherever you are, whatever time zone, whatever spot, that you have thoughts, given your knowledge and your wisdom and your experience. So I would like to invite everyone to now turn to the chat. For those of you who don't work with Zoom often, at the bottom you see chat and you click on chat, and then on the right hand side you have chat that appears on your screen. And I will put a question in the chat and you have 3 minutes, because then we go into the working groups to basically just share what comes to mind. So my question to you, we'll go into detail in the working groups, but my question to you is, when listening to these brief explanations of the 3 building blocks, what comes to mind? And I've just put it in the chat, and it now goes to all of you, and whatever comes to mind, share it, because that knowledge of wisdom, that body of wisdom can then really enrich the global partnership strategy, and the team can take that into account in the process that Emily was talking about. Thank you.
Princess, just to highlight that for the participants, they can put on the Q&A part.
Okay, fantastic. So participants can use Q&A to add their thoughts, and panelists can use chat.
Right.
Great.
They can use both if they wish.
Super. This is true partnership. We're very complementary in the knowledge that we have.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. It's really wonderful. I think it shows already in the chat and in the Q&A all the knowledge around this group, and we're harnessing. I see a smile on the face of Boren that says, "Wow, we're really reaping on all this knowledge from the group." So we'll continue the discussion. I hand over to Boren, who will explain the idea behind the working groups, and we will reconvene after these working groups at 2:55. You will be zoomed back, all done automatically, and then we meet. Over to you, Boren, and I will lead one of the working groups, so I will see some of you later on.
Thank you, Princess Laurentien, for this. I think it's already promising. We have a quite interesting inputs in the Q&A and of course in the chat. So and it's important that we look at the two tracks and keep an eye on both. Let me explain that obviously we wanted to start with a broad insight, and we have already got interventions from the lead expert. We have set a bit the element related to the process. We would like now to deepen a bit the discussion, and we will do that in parallel groups around the three areas. So accountability, collaboration, and financing. Princess Laurentien will be leading the group, I believe, related to accountability. Myself, I will be leading the group on collaboration, and my colleague Guanchol will be leading the group on financing. Leading is moderating, is facilitating. We have, of course, our lead expert who will be the ones who bring the thematic aspect and the substance, but it's important that we have a process that is inclusive. And that's what we are calling on you. First of all, the objective is to listen to each other, hear the perspectives that are probably different from our own perspective, ask questions, but also build on each other insights. And in a way, from a broad perspective, we need to start focusing. What are the solutions? What are the levers that can help us improve and remove the barriers that we have been identifying and that the issue papers have been referring to it? So it's a solution, it's a solving approach, and not just saying what are the problems. And so in few seconds and we will split into the 3 groups. We have time to discuss, we have time to engage, and then we will reconvene with the reporting from each of the session. Stay with us. The magic of the technology will help us to divide into 3 groups, and then the magic will bring us is the magic of Christmas, but before Christmas. So stay with us, and we'll be moving now to the groups. Thank you, Princess Laurentien, and thanks to all colleagues for their input.
Thank you very much. I think for those who are going to join group 2 and 3, the links are provided in the chat room. So if you can click directly there to participate in the discussion of the working group 2 and the 3rd.
So the group with Princess Laurentien on finance, on accountability remains here. Then the group on collaboration and the group on financing will move, and you have the links in the Q&A and the chat. Thank you.
So my group will wait until everyone is zoomed away, and then we'll start the discussion with Joan.
Can we start?
Welcome to you. Sorry, sometimes the technology is not very helpful, and I had to switch and had some issues with the Microsoft team. Thank you for joining us on this working group on collaboration.
No, Bren,
yes,
you're still in our working group.
Oh, really? Sorry for that.
So you need to, and I think. Joan, we cannot start. I see that participants are still leaving. We now have 237 participants. I think we should go down to about 100.
Sure.
So we need.
But it doesn't function with just clicking on the link. It doesn't change to the other group. How will you do it?
Huh.
So I do hope that somebody from UNESCO's technical team is still in this session, and otherwise we'll have a working group with 235 people, which is fine too. Is somebody there from UNESCO's team?
Yes, there is someone here. Yes, basically, so the link we're provided in the chat, when you click on that, this will open your web browser. And from there, you just follow what is written on the screen, and you will enter the Teams meeting.
But it doesn't function. I'm pressing on the link, but the link is so long, it doesn't function. I've even tried to copy it but it's not right.
I did click on the link, and I was able to access the content. On which link are you trying to, which one are you trying to use, group 2 or group 3?
Collaboration.
All right, let me check.
Ingrid, if I now go into chat and I scroll over the link, I do see a hand, and then if you click, I'm not going to click because then I'm gone, but yes.
So when you do click on the link, this will open up your web browser, and on the page that is displayed, you have 3 options. Option 1 is download the Mac app. Second option is continue on this browser. And third option is open your Teams app. I suggest that you use the second option, continue on this browser.
We're down to 211
Still too.
I think your explanation, Joan, was so clear that everyone wants to stay with you.
Well, I think there's this is choiceless action here.
But it's okay. Patience is good.
It has said by UNESCO.
So the discussions have started on the other, groups, and maybe the participants who went to those groups actually stayed online on the Zoom webinar, so that they can reconnect later on. But they are already working in the different sessions. So I suggest that you can go and start the discussions.
Super, great. So we will start with our discussion, and I would like to pick up, Joan, your explanation was very clear. I think that your question on what is the added value of this strategy in addition to what is already happening is a really crucial one. And I think we should...
This is not only a human right, it's a tool and a catalyzer of...
And what I'd like to do is really actively use chat and not just talk, so that we can really get the most out of this group from a content point of view, so that you can continue the drafting process. So Joan, based on on the various questions that you had, I feel that a first question to ask both in the chat and the Q&A could be, what should be the strategic priorities to develop a holistic approach to ECCE and for ECCE to become a political priority? Are you happy?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that my assumptions, because I laid out 3, we could take a piece of this to build the evidence, or we can look at the continuum. And is the assumption correct? And what's people's input around looking prenatal to 8? Emily?
So basically, you want to test the assumption on whether do you agree with the assumption on the continuum?
That's the question.
I certainly agree. Yeah. And not only that, I think that we have to clarify to people that we're not just talking about ECE. It's an important part. And remember that the member states of UNESCO usually are represented by their ministers of finance and education. So of course we want to take advantage of the strength of the leadership of the educational community in countries, along with their finance ministers. But it is absolutely critically important that we embrace health ministries and social or child protection agencies and ministries. I'm afraid that if people think that it's because it's UNESCO, it's only education that we're talking about, we will lose our children. Yes. We have to take the holistic approach.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that is the key to this all. And later on, I will first start asking some questions on some of the assumptions so that you can reap on the knowledge of this group. And the second part of this discussion, I really would like to focus on also the implementation of this strategy. So one is on content and the second one is on the implementation. So the first question I'm putting into the chat, and for those who are in Q&A, answer in Q&A. Do you agree with the approach to focus on the continuum of child development rather than 0 to 3 years, right? John?
Rather than one specific aspect.
Yeah.
And the holistic approach. I think both of those are the cornerstones of this effort.
Yeah, and let's take Continuum, I think, is really then, by definition, I think, is a holistic approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, I've just put it in the chat and you get 2 minutes in the Q&A and in the chat. Those are in the chat.
I somehow lost my larger screen when I tried to go into a group. I can't, I now don't have the access to chat. It's my own problem. This is the first time this ever happened to me.
You lost your larger screen?
I lost my, but I can see you, and I think that
if you go to view, right in the top, you have view, and then you click on that, and you have gallery view, and then you see everyone.
There's a lot of, if you can't see it, Emily, there's a lot coming in that agrees.
Great.
But can we, I would just like to ask so that we really take a good rhythm, so that we have 2 minutes of silence, everybody shares their thinking, and then we take it forward to the next level. Super. Yeah. And maybe Joan, in the meantime, you can read what people are saying, and then later on we can reflect on that.
We will have copies of all of the chat and Q&A, so all of that will be captured.
Okay. The second question I'd like to put in, taking it at a slightly different strategic angle, but I think useful and building on the question you put to the group, is I'd like to take for you for 2 minutes to answer the following question in the chat and Q&A. What should be the strategic priorities to develop a holistic approach to child development and for it to become a top political priority? So this is really about the strategic priorities. Boren said it's not just about analysis, it's really about what should be the strategic priorities. I've just put the question in the chat, and Joan and Emily, in the meantime, will read what comes in. And I would like those who have put in their thinking do the same, because then we can have a brief reflection about what you read and what strikes you from the input that everybody is giving. Thank you so much for the input. And Joan, I know that a lot is coming in. Is there already something that strikes you, and you perhaps have one more follow-up question?
Well, I'll start and just give a summary, and then maybe people can react to that summary. In the case of the first question, I think there was a lot of consensus around the continuity and integration concepts and providing evidence for those.
Yeah.
There was a lot of interest and comments about making sure that we focus on children in special circumstances, children in alternative care, refugee children in the continuity discussion, looking at the disruptions in that continuity, for example, children that are migrating, a focus on extreme poverty. There was a note, and this has been my point from the beginning, that about the need for more data on many of these points and putting the data together across the continuum. On the second question, there was priorities around developing multi-sector outcomes or indicators, expectations across the sectors, the mapping of needs in the country, and building public awareness.
Yeah.
So those are some of the themes. One reflection from earlier in the day, earlier in the afternoon, the balance of using evidence and including child rights is, I think, something that we're going to have to make sure is in the document.
Yeah, super. I would like, knowing that time will pass really quickly, and when we pick up one point, it will be very frustrating to stop the discussion midway. So there's one more question I would like for now to put in the chat, and that has to do more with is a kind of a bridge to the implementation of this strategy. I think that you have now a lot of input for the drafting process based on the chat and the Q&A input. My concern is, and I think it kind of goes to your point of the added value, that no one wants to develop a paper strategy. So I would love to know from this group how to ensure that the GPS that we're currently drafting does not become a paper strategy, and what is the call to action. I would imagine, Joan, that this is a useful get input on this question, right?
Yes, very important. It's the most important.
Right. So I've just put it in the chat. And for those in Q&A, please answer in Q&A how to ensure that the GPS does not become a paper strategy, and what is the call to action. Please kindly take 2 minutes to answer this. And I see input coming in. Please really think about not just the content of the strategy, but the implementation of the strategy. Once we have a document, how to make sure that what needs to happen, that we actually start putting into action and into practice what is written in the strategy. So it's not on the content of the strategy, but it's the implementation and the rollout of the strategy. So the comment from Sandra, for example, is a really useful one. Give us the processes that are already going on where you think if we bring this strategy to that process, then we can actually start having a multiplying factor. So that's the kind of thinking we would love to hear from you. What are the known processes that you know of where this can help catalyze or strengthen or speed up impact? We'll close in a few seconds, then I will ask Joan again to reflect as you did so succinctly on what comes in. Joan, are you ready to reflect?
Yes, many terrific ideas, some of which built on the previous ones, but a real call to involve people at the local level, at the country level, to engage civil society, to raise parent voice, to tie this with other actions. For example, yesterday, Eurochild released their campaign for in Europe. ECDAN also has campaigns, so there was a sense of trying to partner this with other efforts. But I think the overriding thing is this desire to have more more people engaged at the local and country level to make this happen, because otherwise it comes down from the top and it doesn't work.
Right. So building on that actually begs a very important other question for this group. And I hope that you, in a zoomed out world where we're constantly talking, it's actually quite nice to do this a little bit in silence for now. I would then like to have, building on that, I would love to hear from you. How do you see your role in the implementation of this GPS? Because then that closes that implementation section of the work for GPS. So the question in the chat is now, and then I promise no more questions in the chat. Then I'd like to hear reflections. How do you see your role in the implementation of this GPS? Take 2 more minutes, and then I open the floor. But it's I'd rather for you to open your video, so that I can, we really feel that we can have a dialogue. So take 2 minutes to say, how do you see your role in the implementation of this GPS?
You know, can I add one question or have people think? One of the challenges here is going to be putting together the evidence that we have to underscore the importance of the continuum. And if there are people that would like to work on that, I would like to hear from them.
So how do we put together the evidence?
Around the continuum, making sure that we have evidence that links one developmental level to the next.
Yeah. How do we put together the evidence around the continuum? I think by now we have that as a shared language. So I will put that in the chat just now. How do we put together the evidence around the continuum?
And I think one thing while I'm looking at all these is that you know, part of the actions could be what other research we'd need.
Right. And for the question in the chat, what GPS, Global Partnership Strategy around early childhood development. Rightly put, I stay away from ECEE, rightly so, ECCE, but it's the Global Partnership Strategy that we're currently drafting for those coming late. And we're gathering insights for this strategy. And the last question in the chat is how do we develop how do we put together the evidence around the continuum? So from prenatal to 8 years old, that's what we agree need to be covered by this strategy.
Another thing I would like to mention is that it's important to...
Emily, in this work form, I think it's important so that people can really share their thoughts. If we can just take 1 minute, let people do their thinking because they won't be listening and
right.
we lose their insights. I'll come back to you in a minute. Okay, Emily, you have another question?
Yeah, I think number one is that we should emphasize how. How are we going to help? That's number one. And the second is that interagency collaboration is critically important here. That means UNESCO, UNICEF, WHO, World Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, all of these major structures that we have that do such fantastic work in many countries, but focusing mainly at program levels rather than policy implementation levels. We've got to work together, join together, country after country, to be able to support the country's decisions.
Okay, great. So first I put in the chat with 1 minute input into the question Emily once answered, how do we gather that evidence, right? That's what you want?
And how do we get interagency collaboration?
There are two questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so first I put how do we gather that evidence, not just it's how do we gather the evidence, and then in a minute I will ask you to put in about the interagency. Thank you.
Thanks. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the second question is how to ensure collaboration.
Interagency collaboration.
At policy development level, right?
Policy and program level, but the thing is that we have separate programs in countries and they're often competing with one another. We need to build interagency collaboration around early childhood development, not little bits here and little bits there. They're often even working against each other without meaning to. So we really need
I've highlighted
agency.
Yeah, how to ensure real agency. Yeah.
Excellent.
So you have 2 minutes, and thank you so much for sharing all your thoughts. And make it as specific as possible, and be as innovative and daring as you can in answering the question. Not generic, but be specific. What are the issues we need to overcome?
Good. Good. Getting some good suggestions. Great. I love the one on country leadership that came up.
I love them all.
Yeah.
I agree. There's great ideas here.
Now is not the time to put a hierarchy to the answers. That's important.
Right.
Okay. We have 10 minutes. And Joan, I'm not sure that it's. I think later on you will summarize in the plenary the key points out of this discussion. But I would like, realizing how frustrating it is. I hope that you're all feeling part of this process, even though you don't speak. But this is the lovely thing about digital collaboration, that actually there's a lot more that we can share in terms of knowledge, but just not in the normal way, so that you don't speak, but it's much more efficient from a content point of view. But is there anyone who has gone through the chat and wants to share what strikes you when you read this? Is there something where you say, I haven't looked at it this way? And the only time I will be strict is when you bring in your own perspective, but that is indeed what people have now seen in the chat. So is there anyone in the group? I don't see you, so do open your video and raise your hand who wants to say something on what this discussion, what these insights tell you.
Looks like Pat Dolan is ready, which is terrific.
Great. Pat, would you like to share what you read in all of this?
Indeed, and thank you very much. I'm doing that because I'm Irish. And
Pat, can you open your video? Or yes, I see you. Yes.
Yeah. I'm just saying I'm doing this because I'm Irish. And what struck me as really important is three things. One is that what we're trying to address is not just a children's issue. It's a human issue across civic society, up to and including government and higher. The second thing is that no one person has the answer here, but to be really, from the implementation point of view, what is key is some of us have some of the answers. We're not being brought together with our different pieces of the jigsaw. and we may still be missing a few pieces. So for me, I think the idea of championing champions is what is key here. And as Joan has said, not just in UNESCO, but across the whole system. And I really like the idea. I'm UNESCO Chair for Children, Youth and Civic Engagement. I really like the idea on not siloing an age group, because development is different across the age group.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, thank you. Who else? Who would like to reflect in a similar, succinct way as Pat did? I'm sure that there are people.
Take yourself a video. She'll be able to see it.
Please, if you want to speak. Yes.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello, everyone.
Yes, we can hear
everyone.
you.
Hear you.
And what is it?
Glad.
How is your?
What I liked about this discussion is that we went low down to the people. We always think when we're making strategies, making policies, we're always thinking at a high strategic level. That's our problem. We don't collaborate with the people that are really engaging, or that are really in our schools, that are really suffering from what's happening to our children due to everything that's happening, wars or COVID-19, or for early childhood education, or for early childhood children. So what I liked about this discussion, that it opened our eyes that there are people down there. You should, not just the Ministry of Education, just put the policies and put the strategies. You should collaborate with those people, see their ideas, say what they have, see what they struggle every day for their children to have some teaching. So that's the best thing I think I got out of it. Everything was very, very, whole ideas were very, you just need to open your mind and just brainstorm what you have. All the ideas that I read in the chat and all the ideas that I heard were very, very, I just want to stay maybe 4 or 5 hours just to think and sit with a group and just talk and chat about what we heard. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you for your work. Thanks.
Thank you. Who else?
Shikufe is on in Okukawa.
What is
Hi. So the main thing that I want to take away from the chat is the importance of longitudinal research, longitudinal planning, working to build data systems, working to build systems in general. And I think one of the most important interagency collaboration effects will be around systems building, and how do we provide the technical support we need to enable countries to do that, especially from a long-term perspective. So that was really critical to progress.
Super. Who else? Great reflections.
Kawa, did you have a comment? I see you on the video.
If you want to reflect on what you read in the chat, similar to Pat and Nada and Shekufe, please open your video and share your thoughts. We have a few more minutes.
Jose Eduardo would like to speak. I don't know.
Yeah, I see that too.
Jose, if you could come off mute and make your comment.
Okay. Joan, we have just a few minutes. And Emily, you've had a chance perhaps. Do you want to share 1 or 2 thoughts on what you're picking up on this?
I was very, very pleased to see the emphasis on basically what each person can do. I think that by each person going out of their comfort zone and entering into collaboration with others, we're going to begin to have greater force. We have great specialists on this whole program. And if they were to combine together, to join together, to be a collective voice for a few strategic priorities and actions, we would really begin to move the world. Some of us are in agencies or organizations, others are in universities, but together we are a force. And I do see that that is coming through loud and clear from the wonderful suggestions. I'm deeply touched. There are some suggestions that are coming in Spanish and in French. Bravo and gracias. We need all of your ideas. I'm concerned that we don't have enough of the Spanish-speaking world integrated to the rest of the world, and the same goes for the Francophone world. We need to get everyone working together. And then we need more concrete, daring suggestions about what could be done to move the work forward. So we are working today doing this, but I want you to sit down later on today and think deeply about what are great big initiatives that could be undertaken in the fields of action for early childhood development in the coming year. I want you to think about what could be done to really change things, to expand investment, to expand collaboration, to expand attention to the children who most need the assistance.
Okay,
if we do that, we will have great help going forward.
One comment, that was terrific, Emily. I think one of the things this effort's going to need is help in putting together the evidence. And there have been several people that volunteered. I hope they continue to do that. You know, usually Stephen Lai is on. We have spent months and years developing evidence for even one part of this continuum. So the question is, how do we quickly put some evidence together to be the backbone of this, but then move to action? I think that's your call to us, and to not just dwell on putting together the evidence.
Yes,
but we need the evidence.
I think that we need to work on evidence, and we need to work on what are the problems and barriers, but we really need to work on what are our strategic priorities and what are the actions we can undertake. All the rest is prologue. We've got to get beyond that. We're constantly studying what do we do poorly or what do we do well. We need to go into now, what can we do to really expand our services so that all children are benefited.
Yes, and one of the elements, perhaps in closing, because at some point we'll be zoomed back and all the groups will come back together in a few minutes. So if I can just close by saying that one of the elements that I discussed with UNESCO's team is, I know that if a strategy, and I think that some of the comments refer to that as well, if there's no agile action team that actually is the owner of the strategy, that gets the mandate and that gets, but not in the hierarchical usual way, but across all hierarchies, across all agencies, and just is completely mission driven, just like a startup, and says how to be the ignition place, then it's not going to happen. That is my great concern. This is why I'm so pleased that we also talked about some of the implementation and the role that everyone will play, because we talk endlessly about collaboration, but it's just about doing. What happens today, and the work forum that I chose, is indeed not for one or two people to speak, but for an entire community to share their wisdom. And then it's about you and us as a central team to kind of build on that knowledge and then shape it. So one of the questions I have to the UNESCO team is, and this is why I think the whole notion of financing is also important, this will only take off. I've seen that happen with GAL. Some of you may have been involved in the GAL strategy, in the SDG 4 on literacy, and it just didn't take off because there was no agile action team behind it that could actually work. So that is my hope, and that is what my role will be, to make sure that that actually takes place. So that is the next phase. I see that we're now joined by everyone. I think we are the ones who stayed in the plenary room, and
you are the lucky one.
You've traveled to wonderful places, Boren, with your group, and Guangzhou, and we are welcoming you back into the plenary room.
Thank you, Princess Laurentien. I suggest that we wait 30 seconds to get all colleagues joining back. I see that we have most of the colleagues reconnected, also the participants and the panelists. But let's take 30 seconds and then we can resume. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I think we have been very disciplined. We are all back from group 2 and group 3.
Per groep. Super. So welcome back, everyone. It is, of course, frustrating that we didn't get a sense of the dynamic of each of the groups, but I'm sure that your thoughts and discussions were fruitful as well. We used the chat a lot so that we really reaped a lot of the insights through the chat. I'd like to make sure that that somebody from UNESCO saves the chat, because it's magical wisdom that is really now in our hands to develop this strategy further. What I'd like to do now is I will be moderating just the feedback and mainly being the timekeeper on each of the groups. So I would like to give, and not just because it was my group, but just because it's group number 1, I'd like to give the floor to Joan to summarize in 3 minutes. I know it's hard. There's a lot we've covered. What were your main takeaways and key insights from this discussion?
Well, first of all, I want to say it was a terrific conversation in multiple languages. It was great. And I want to thank everyone for their input. We posed about 5 different questions. I'll mention 3. First of all, there was the question about whether we were in the right direction, about focusing on the continuum. And I think there was a lot of agreement on that. There was a call to balance the evidence with the child rights perspective. There was a lot of, in the question around whether we were right on the continuum, there was a call to really focus on those children with special needs, children out of family care, the disruptions that refugee and migrant children go through, and those children in extreme poverty. There was an acknowledgement, as I said in the beginning, that we've got holes in the data around the longitudinal perspective. The second question was about priority setting, and we got several inputs to look at multiple sector outcomes, to not just focus on the education sector, but what are the outcomes we expect across the ministries, to helping map country needs, and to building awareness. And that led really into the third question, which was really about what's the action here? And I think everybody we want to build the evidence, but we really want to move it to action. And there was a tremendous input about the importance of civil society, of building parent voice, or about really listening to the local level and to the country level. And really a sense of democratizing the effort, which is so important right now. There was a real call for bringing this effort into harmony with other efforts. For example, Eurochild just released their strategy this week. ECDEN has different campaigns. There's several partnerships. And then finally, a call for global interagency, although there was an interest in grassroots and this voice up, there was also a continued call, as we always do, for interagency coordination at the global level across the UN agencies and with other partners. So a lot to think about.
Super, thank you.
Has to be, the collaboration should be around inclusive child-centered development collaboration. So a child-centered inclusive is one important aspect. The second, that to support that, you need the leadership. And in any system, there should be a leader that can drive the agenda and will be accountable in mobilizing that collaboration. The third aspect that we thought important is about the need for legislation. Without legislation and defining the responsibilities, the accountability, there is a gap in the system. The fourth was about regulatory aspects. It's not sufficient to have the collaboration. There is also importance of regulating and ensuring that there is a right-based perspective, that evidences related to what is happening are shared and transparent, that there is modalities for involving, for example, the private sector, but making them also accountable, and having the right regulatory framework. The fourth aspect that we thought is that there is the collaboration should also focus on the professional development, in particular for the teaching staff, but not only, is the professional development of all the workers in the field of ECCE. The fifth aspect that we discussed was about the importance of having the evidence and the data to monitor, to assess the effectiveness of the collaboration and involve, for example, academia, involve other institutions. The last one, which was a very important point that colleagues have mentioned, is the multi-sectorial dimension of the collaboration and the needs for involving other sectors than education or family or social affairs, and having much more broader collaboration. These are the six elements that we have taken, but maybe Mercedes can add to that if you allow, Princess Laurentien. Please, Mercedes.
Thank you very much. Well, you have summarized very well. The only thing I want to stress is that all the public policies are aimed to this to early childhood must be based in right-based approach and in a comprehensive and intersectoral definition of early childhood education and care and development. And of course, we have to pay attention, as Ingrid said, on quality, because quality is a key dimension of the realization of the right of the child and must lie in the heart of all the programs of early childhood education and care. And of course, we have to make a research and give a voice to the good practices and the good policies that have been developed all over the countries on the world, because we have very good experiences and models in order to organize this fragmented field. And all the countries and all the participants mentioned the importance of governance and the importance of detecting a champion to bring together the voices of all the sectors in order to have a very strong approach and very cross-sector collaboration. Thank you very much.
Maybe, Princess Laurentien, in terms of action, we had 3 actions that were suggested. One is the capacity building, in particular of the stakeholders. The second, a database or repository of legislations, policies, and program. And the third is to data and data collection that can be conducted at the global, regional, and national level. These were the three actions that were suggested, but there were, as you said, the rich inputs in the chat that probably we needed to capture, and my colleagues will be capturing that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and what is interesting is that building on, so in a way we talked about what evidence and what are the gaps of knowledge and so on, and you talked about an instrument. So you see how little by little we're piecing together the puzzle of what actually needs to happen. So, so that fits really nicely with the discussion that we had indeed. Wonderful, and this is indeed what needs to happen after this meeting, but you'll be talking about that in a moment. Let's first listen to Guang Chou, and perhaps someone else from your group in the next 3 minutes. And then after you, I will pass back the floor to Boren. I will say a few closing remarks, pass back to Boren, who will take over, and Guang Chou the rest of the meeting. And we finish sharply at 3:30. Guang Chou, feedback.
Okay, thank you very much. We didn't have the luxury of the group 1, which had a Zoom platform and all these languages. Well, and I think the majority of the participants prefer to stay with you. And while at the same time, we did have a group of very dynamic participants. We exchanged a lot of ideas, insights. And while we had a kind of focused on the financing issue, I feel like listening to what Group 2 discussed, we discussed more or less the same things. So we discussed about regulation, and also we discussed about the planning policy, integration of stronger integration of ECCE in sector planning. We discussed also the need for data and evidence and advocacy and intersectoral aspects. So I'd like to invite Divya to provide the summary of our discussion, given the limited time. Divya? Hello? I'm just wondering, Divya? Oh, Christine? Sorry.
Yes, Kristen, if you want to add, you had a really eloquent introduction of the topics. What were the 3 main takeaways from the discussion that you had?
Great, thank you. I think Guang Chou did an excellent job summarizing, and we did echo a lot of what the second group said. You know, we focused on how to raise greater political will and legal commitments. So that involved, you know, how do we have policies, making sure we have policies on compulsory early childhood education, really making sure that we have sensitization of political leaders, making sure that evidence-based results and data are in their hands, and making sure that we also have clear capacity building at country level. And how to strengthen investments, we talked about, as Guang Chou mentioned, and I will definitely say with my GPE hat, making sure that we're integrating early childhood education into these sector plans, that we're having direct public investment is reaching the most marginalized, and we have clear standards and regulations. We had a few mentions of some promising financial modalities and some examples that were shared about Canada and Uganda and even the Pacific, talking about how the Ministry of Finance talking with the Ministry of Education, and some great examples there, but that was just a brief snapshot of what our group discussed. Thank you.
So you felt that you have enough out of the discussion to really start developing also the narrative around what are the bottlenecks for this, what you mentioned in the beginning, the increase in the budget and effective spending, and we can now develop that further based on the input that you received.
Yeah, we have collected a lot of inputs, which provide a solid database, if I may say this way, to further. I don't know if Divya, you wanted to add something very quickly.
I think, yeah, maybe 1 minute, and then because then we need enough time for the closing of and actually a very important part for the process next to it. So just 1 minute, and then I'll pass on back to Boren.
Yeah, thank you. And I really apologize for difficulties both on the team and this connection. But I think one important issue came up was on really the investment in data, both while looking at political will as well as while looking at the issues on what is working, because particularly looking at modalities around innovative financing, which, both in terms of being able to demonstrate the results, very often being results-based financing mechanisms, but also in terms of generating the political will. I think the issue of investing in data, particularly for equity arguments, the cost, quality, and the outcomes was emphasized. The other point, and I'm sorry, I may have missed that because I was not able to hear for a while, but the issue on public expenditure and benefit analysis, and I think that the example of Canada was highlighted, to look at the impact on labor market participation of women, which was actually one of the issues that has further strengthened the role of ECE in government space. And then a point was made also on expansion of the fiscal space, both in terms of...
Divya, may I ask, I'm sorry, but we have to be a little bit strict on time.
Yeah, I'm just closing. So just the last point was on the fiscal space and the efficiency of spending, particularly prioritizing those who are most vulnerable to start with right now, not just coming at the end. I'll close there. Thank you.
Super, thank you. Well, it sounds like I will hand over back to Boren, but I think it sounds like we really have achieved, thanks to all of your active participation and the discipline of sharing through this inclusive dialogue methodology and really gathering all these insights. I kind of feel that even though I would love to be with you in one room, we would not have managed to get all of these insights had we been in one room, because we would have taken way too much space out of the minds of all of you. So I'm deeply impressed with the richness of this community. And as was discussed in our group, that Joan and Emily and I felt, is that collaboration starts now. It's not something, it's a matter of understanding and appreciating that everyone has a piece of the puzzle. Just like Pat said very much in the beginning, we all have a piece of the puzzle and no one has one answer. It's a matter of putting them together and then you have that strategy. So I really believe in this process led by Boren and his team, and I'd like to thank all of you. Over to you, Boren, to take us forward on the next steps after this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and really appreciate Princess Laurentien, your leadership and the way we have been putting the architecture of this process in a participatory and inclusive approach. I would like to start with that, is that this is a process that is agile, and that is involving interagency, that is involving the stakeholders, that is inclusive in its nature. And I would like to thank our colleagues in EGDAN and the EGDAN Secretariat, because they have been providing really great support to ensure that we are able to manage the communication and the involvement of all colleagues and organize this event. Now, we are not finishing here. First of all, the lead expert and the UNESCO team will be working on the different inputs that we have received today, and that will help us to go further in terms of the key pillars that we have identified. The drafting committee under the leadership of Emily will be convening, and the work will be starting very soon. Of course, we have the holidays that will come in between, but hopefully we'll start the year very quickly to start the work of the drafting committee, and we'll continue the technical consultation with all the members and all colleagues. We have, of course, a lot of input that have been shared. Our UNICEF colleagues have shared the important report that was put, and obviously we need to build on those data. But as some of the colleagues said, we are moving from the diagnosis and the data to actions and a strategy. And that's the shift that we need to make now from the inception meeting, the technical meeting. I think we have, of course, we didn't how could close the door, but we need to move to action. And I think that's what the drafting committee will be doing, is to translate those inputs and the insights into actions, into result-based document that would be prepared before the high-level meeting we planned for the 28th of January. We'll be continuing the work with the nominees by the agencies and the ministries before the high-level meeting, and to prepare, also to help them inform and brief their leadership for joining the meeting that is planned 28th of January. So we have key milestones. The question is how we will manage the process. And just to say that right after this meeting, we'll be in contact with the technical teams and the drafting committee to share with them the input that we have received, the insight of this meeting, and to continue the dialogue and get ready for the high-level meeting, for which we will be sending the invitation very soon. And hopefully on the 28th, we should be ready to present the overall strategy and the modality of its implementation. It's not only the strategy that we'll be suggesting, is also how this strategy will be implemented and how we will be monitoring its implementation. I hope that gives a bit the overall ideas. If there are any, I see the chat, a lot of positive input, but we would like, of course, to get actions and out of the positive spirit that we are having, translate that into positive actions. Princess, do you want to add something, please?
Yes, Borhan, one question that I have is one of the parts of this inclusive bottom-up approach that we've been taking in developing this strategy is, of course, we're building support going as we move along, let's say. This is not a top-down approach, but a bottom-up approach. Is there anything that you need from this group that they can help sort of generate enthusiasm and interest at their political level in their countries, so that they participate in the meeting in January? So if that is the case, then if you are enthusiastic, all of you around, then you are, of course, now champions of the strategy that we're building as we walk along. So is there anything that you want from this group? More ministers, more commitment, because then we can use the months while we're all in semi-lockdown.
Thank you. We need three things. And thank you, Princess, for highlighting that. First of all, we want you to continue connecting with the Secretariat and with my colleagues, Rokaya and Guangchol, and of course with the drafting committee. It's very important that the interaction doesn't stop, and the insight that you may have will be important. We would like to share with you the key highlight that you can convey to the leaders, so that we ensure the highest and the widest participation from a political point of view. This is very important, and as soon as we have the meeting with the drafting committee, we'll be also communicating with you about how to attract the attention of the policymakers and what we expect from them in joining the meeting, because they will be asking why we should join, what is expected, and I think it's very important to prepare. And the third aspect is to use you as the ambassadors. I think we have around 220 ambassadors, but obviously we would like you to play that role of reaching out to the partners, to the national stakeholders, to inform about this initiative. We are making some communication and giving visibility, but you are the ambassador, you are the network. So if you inform 10, then we will get 2,000. If you inform 20,000, then we will have 400,000. So the question is how we ensure and amplify the message to the wider public, and that at the country level, at the regional level, they know about this initiative. That's how we will get the ownership as well, and this bottom-up approach. I hope I've responded, Princess, please.
Yes, and I fully agree. But immediately then I will also invite you, as Boren rightly said, continue to feed. Co-ownership does not stop with one moment. It's a continuum, just like what we're working on from a content point of view. So you're only an ambassador, then do feedback to the team at UNESCO. What does it take for you to be that continuous ambassador? So it's not UNESCO putting you forward ambassador. You have to say, what does that take to be an ambassador and to feel that ambassador, and and what do you need to take that very important role? Because that is that collaborative approach that we are envisaging from this GPS approach. So do be critical and say, okay, fine, I want to be an ambassador. I want to take it forward. I want to take certain actions, but I can only do that if this. That's what you need to share with us. So into closing, I think the dialogue approach among all of us within the community is equally important, that we continue that. So thank you, and I will now really not say anything else.
No, thank you very much, really, Princess. I appreciate and the points that you have highlighted are important. And just to say that, of course, in these sessions, many colleagues refer to the technology, and the technology can help us in amplifying the messages, using the social media, using all the means that are available today for us to communicate and make visible this important initiative. Let me give the floor to my colleague, Guangshol Chang, to give a bit the vote of thanks and the closing points. Please, Guangshol.
Thank you very much, Boren. And so I was asked to provide some thoughts, and I'd like, on behalf of all of us, thank really Her Royal Highness Princess Laurentien for really her drive, her leadership, her passion, her commitment, and who brought us all here around the table and from everywhere across the world to discuss this important topic. Really, thank you once again. I think you brought us to a new journey of thinking out of the box and being more innovative, so that we can come with not only a strategy but also actions. I hope that we will stay on with us, will guide us, will lead us, will take us through the journey. I'd like also to thank the content leaders, if I may say this way, the leaders of the working groups, who spend these days and nights, even sacrificing their weekends to come up with a set of really solid foundations and contents. Sometimes not understanding why you are doing it. Sometimes asking us what Princess Laurentien has in mind. So you have been there to kind of navigate across between. Really, I think you have been wonderful. I think your role will be critical through the process. I'd like also to thank all the participants, providing great inputs, ideas, concrete examples, insights that can all be used in order to enrich the discussion and then provide not only bones but meat to the building blocks that we are working on. And I'd like to make a plea here, those participants, since you participate in different building blocks, if you think you'd like to contribute concretely to one of the building blocks, just let us know in the Secretariat. We will direct you to the focal points and the work leaders. I'd like, if Princess Laurentien allow me, I'd like to also thank my colleagues who learned a lot during this period. We are not sure about what you are talking about, but we learned a lot. Now we are almost becoming, not me, my colleagues, becoming the experts of innovative dialogue. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you. And Princess, do you want to say a final word?
Well, I just put in the chat, thank you, everyone. Borhan, Guangzhou, Rokaya, the team leads, Emily, for your energy, wisdom, and particularly, I guess, for your patience with me. I am a great believer in the right processes. I think that in many of the issues that we all work on, I am increasingly frustrated and I think driven by the emergency that Stefania was talking about at the beginning. On so many levels, there are emergencies, and I'm sometimes ashamed of the poor processes we put in place for change. And we talk, but we don't actually have make the impact. And I guess what my takeaway is that if you trust each other from different perspectives, different ways of working, and you allowed Borhan and your team, you allowed me to take that in, and you see the amazing knowledge around such a rich community of 210 people, and you just allow that to be flourishing, how much that takes us forward. So I really do think it's thank you for your patience with me. I realize it's not always easy because I think so differently, but together we do it, and I couldn't do any of this without you. So enough compliments, and let's get to work.
Let's get to work, and happy season and then holidays to all colleagues, but let's continue to work. Thank you very much. Bye.
The recording has stopped.